In 2,000 years, almost 9 million people will live on this exact bend of the river. You are standing on two low hills of gravel beside a wide gray river. There is no city here, not yet. It is roughly 2,000 years ago. The river in front of you is broad and brown and moving, sliding past mudflats and reed beds toward the sea somewhere to the east. Behind you, low rolling country and dark woods. The hills under your feet are barely hills at all, just dry ground rising a little above the marsh. The air smells of salt and river mud. There is no road. There is no bridge. There is no name. In 2,000 years, almost 9 million people will live on this exact bend of the river. One of the most important cities in human history will rise from this mud. So why here? Why these two dull little gravel hills and not anywhere else along hundreds of miles of riverbank? Look at the river. The answer is in the water, and it is more clever than it looks. This is the River Thames. And the spot where you are standing is a kind of perfect accident, a place where two opposite needs meet at exactly the same point. Here is the first need. A great trading city wants ships. Big seagoing ships coming in from the ocean, loaded with goods. The Thames is a tidal river, which means the sea pushes its way upstream twice a day, raising the water and carrying ships inland with it. A boat can ride that incoming tide far up the river without rowing against the current. And right about here, at these gravel hills, is roughly as far inland as a heavy seagoing ship can comfortably come. Go much further upstream, and the river turns shallow and winding, so this spot is the head of navigation. The furthest the ocean reaches into the land. Now here's the second need, and it pulls in the opposite direction. A city does not only want ships on the water, it wants roads on the land. It needs to move people and carts across the river, north and south, to tie the whole country together. For that, you need a place narrow and firm enough to build a bridge. Downstream, toward the sea, the Thames spreads out wide and marshy and impossible to cross. Upstream, you lose your ships. But right here at these two gravel hills, the river is narrow enough and the banks are dry and solid enough to carry a bridge. This is the lowest bridging point, the closest you can build a river crossing to the sea. Do you see what that means? This single spot is the one place that is both the farthest inland for ships and the closest to the sea for a bridge. Ocean trade and overland roads meet here, and only here. That is the secret of the gravel hills. Think about how rare that is. A river is usually good for one thing or the other. Near the sea, it is wide and easy for ships, but far too broad to bridge. Far inland, it is easy to bridge, but too shallow for real cargo. The genius of this bend is that it does both jobs at once. It is the hinge where transport on water hands over to transport on land. Whoever controlled this hinge would control the movement of an entire island. So why did it sit empty for so long? For a long time, nobody used it. Then came Rome. In the year 43, the Roman Empire invaded Britain under the Emperor Claudius. The legions pushed inland, and they came to this river, and they understood at once what they were looking at. Within a few years, around the year 47 to 50, the Romans founded a settlement on the gravel hills and built a wooden bridge across the Thames, near where London Bridge still stands today. They called the town Londinium. And the moment that bridge went up, the whole map of Britain reorganized itself around this spot. Roman roads were driven out from Londinium like spokes from a hub, north, west, and south. If you wanted to cross the great river of southern Britain, you came here. If you wanted to ship goods to the empire, you came here. The bridge made it the center of the roads. The port made it the center of the trade. A muddy crossing had become the beating heart of Roman Britain. It almost died young. Around the year 60, a British queen named Boudica led a furious revolt against Roman rule. Her army marched on Londinium and burned it to the ground. Archaeologists today still find a layer of scorched red earth under the modern city from that exact fire. But the location was too good to abandon. The Romans came back and rebuilt, bigger than before. Within a couple of centuries, Londinium had become the capital of Roman Britain, with a great stone wall ringing the city. You can still hear that wall in the map today, in names like Aldgate, Ludgate, and Bishopsgate, the old gates in the Roman defenses. Below the bridge lay a stretch of river where the seagoing ships tied up to unload. For centuries, it would be known as the Pool of London, the city's front door to the world. Then Rome fell. The legions left Britain around the year 410, and Londinium faded, half empty, its great wall crumbling. For a while the gravel hills went quiet again, but geography does not forget. The bridging point was still the bridging point. The head of navigation was still the head of navigation. The spot was simply too useful to stay empty. In the year 886, the Anglo-Saxon king Alfred the Great re-established a settlement inside the old Roman walls, and London began to grow all over again, for the same reasons it had the first time. And grow it did, century after century, always anchored to that one river crossing. Medieval London packed itself behind the old walls. A famous stone London Bridge, crowded with houses and shops, rose over the Thames. Wharves and warehouses crammed the riverbank. Even disaster could not move it. When the Great Fire of London swept through the wooden city in 1666 and burned most of it to ash, Londoners simply rebuilt on the very same streets. The location was never the thing that burned. What burned was timber and thatch. What stayed was the geography. Then came the turning point that made London not just important, but the largest city on earth. Ships. More and more ships. As Britain reached out across the oceans and built a global trading empire, every one of those trade routes ran back to the Thames, back to the Pool of London, back to the gravel hills. The river became unbelievably crowded, a forest of masts. So in the early 1800s, London began carving enormous enclosed docks out of the riverbank to handle the flood of cargo. Places with names like the West India Docks opened in 1802. Sugar, tea, spices, timber, and goods from across the world poured through this one river bend, and whole districts grew up just to serve it. Dock workers and sailors, merchants and clerks, the insurers and bankers who paid for every voyage and bet on its safe return. The money that flowed through the Pool of London built banks and counting houses whose names still move world finance today. The little gravel crossing had quietly become the till of an empire. By the 1800s, London was the biggest city humanity had ever built, the financial and trading capital of a quarter of the planet. And it had grown, layer by layer, out from two low hills beside a tidal river, for one geographic reason that never changed. So look at it now. Almost 9 million people. A dense, endless city of glass towers and old churches and bridges, sprawling for miles along both banks. And in the middle of all of it, still, the River Thames, sliding past exactly as it did 2,000 years ago. The tide still rises and falls twice a day, just as it did when there was nothing here but mud and reeds. Stand on London Bridge today, in the roar of the traffic, and you are standing almost exactly where the Romans drove their first wooden piles into the riverbed. The crossing is still the crossing. The reason is still the reason. None of this was luck. A bridge needs a narrow, firm spot. A port needs the tide. And there was just one place on the whole river where those two things sat on top of each other, where the sea reached its furthest inland and the land found its closest crossing to the sea. You are standing on two low hills of gravel, beside a wide gray river. The woods are gone. The marsh is gone. The wall is just a row of street names now. But the river is exactly where it always was, rising and falling with the distant sea, quietly explaining, if you know how to look, why 9 million people are standing here with you.